Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We have been talking about, discussing about, thinking about great women of India. Now, I will repeat the question that I asked some time ago. Maybe the same question is there in all your minds too. How do we judge a person to be great? Or when do we call a person to be a great person? Do we call someone great because of the qualifications that the person has? If one has lots of educational qualifications, several degrees, several names, several letters attached to their name, would we call that person to be great? Or would we call someone great if he or she has lots of facilities, lots of wealth, lots of all those comfort areas? When do we call one a great person? It is not because someone has several educational qualifications, not because someone has lots of wealth, lots of properties, and not because someone boasts of several facilities that we call someone great. We all know we call a person great only when that person is able to show love and compassion to others. Is it not? So, the basic for greatness to be labeled, evaluated, and to be judged is love and compassion. Anyone who is compassionate, anyone who is able to show love and be loving, lovable to others, we call that person a great person. It is not the education, it is not the intellect, it is not the intelligence that matters. I'm reminded of the lines of Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara, in his very famous Bhajagovindam verse, talks of this phenomenon. He asks a question. If the Lord of Death, Yama, knocks at the door, would it be possible for someone to say, Yama, please wait. Let me complete this thesis of mine. Let me complete this examination paper of mine and then come to you. Would it be possible to say that? Would all our education save us at the doorstep of death, at the threshold of death? And he categorically states, Nahi nahi rakshati dukrin karane. Samprapte sannihite kale nahi nahi rakshati dukrin karane. Dukrin is a chapter in grammar, and it's supposed to be the highest, the most toughest part of Sanskrit grammar. And is it possible to say that I've mastered Sanskrit grammar and tell the Lord of Death, I will not come with you because I have all the education with me? No, it is not possible. But then, what is possible? It is always possible to have compassion, to have love, not only towards people who are close to us, but towards everything. And that is what is real devotion. I would like at this point for all of us to think of a particular woman whose story is known in South India. Please do not ask me as to what her name is. I do not know. Not that I do not know. No one knows her name. There was a devotee by name Neela Nakkar. Neela Nakkar was a Shaivite devotee, meaning he was devoted to Lord Shiva. And every day, Neela Nakkar would go to the temple in a small little village, take upon himself the responsibility of cleaning the temple, keeping everything in place in the temple, and perform the pujas required. This was his daily routine. He would go in the morning, clean the area, perform the pujas, stay there for some time, show all his love and devotion to the Lord. At the evening, he'll come back home. And whenever he went, his wife accompanied him. She would go along with him, do whatever help she could do. She would carry the water pot, fetch water for the puja, fetch water for the abhishekam, and do small little jobs which she would be able to do there. One day, when Neela Nakkar went near the temple and was about to open the door of the temple, the doors were shut, and it was the custom that in the morning the doors would be opened. So Neela Nakkar went there. He was just about to open the door, and it was a very small temple, not a large, huge temple, not a very big temple, a very small village temple. So from the doorstep itself, people could see what was inside. And what would be there in a Shiva temple? Naturally, a Shivalinga. There was a Shivalinga, and from the doorstep area, they could see the Shivalinga. So please visualize what would have happened. Neela Nakkar and his wife, they just opened the door. As the doors were being opened, this lady, wife of Neela Nakkar, suddenly darted inside. Obviously, she had seen something there, and she darted in. Neela Nakkar could not even understand what was happening. She just pushed him and darted inside. She ran towards the Shivalinga. By the time Neela Nakkar could, kind of put himself back into normalcy and then look as to what was happening, he could see she was almost kind of spitting on the Shivalinga. He could see that she was kind of blowing. As she was blowing, a few drops of her saliva were falling on the Shivalinga. She was kind of blowing with her mouth. This is the only image that he saw. He did not know what exactly had happened. He only knew that she pushed him, she ran, and as he looked up, she was blowing, and there were a few drops of saliva getting stuck on the Shivalinga. This is something which should not be done. This is a forbidden kind of action, is it not? Spitting on the Godhead, blowing on the Godhead, and then drops of saliva falling on the Godhead. How could this be permitted? Neela Nakkar was aghast. He was so terribly shocked. He was irritated, annoyed. He just could not control himself. He just called the wife. She came closer to him. It is a very small temple. So she moved from there and came closer to him without even asking for a single answer, not asking for any explanation. He said, "You're not my wife." She tried explaining. She was wanting to say something. She said, there was, but he would not listen to her. He said, "Nothing doing. I found you blowing on my Shiva, on my Lord. You're no longer my wife. I have disowned you." And with that, he turned round. He started doing whatever he had to do. And then she did not know what to say or what to do. She went and sat in one corner. This man would go fetch more water. Every day she would fetch water. Now today he had to fetch water. And he brought more water because he wanted to clean Shivalinga of all that, the bad thing that she had done. He thought it was not correct of her to have blown across the Shivalinga, and he had to clean all that. He had to cleanse the Godhead. So he brought more water, poured more water, performed Abhishekam, completed his puja, and with a very heavy heart, he went back home. This poor lady, she sat in one corner because the husband had said that she was no longer his wife. She could not go with him. Those were times when people respected the spoken word. If a word was spoken, it meant what was to be done. It is not that we can say, no, 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 I just like that told it. Nothing wrong. You can just ignore the word. No. If a word was spoken, it was taken in its full spirit and meaning. So this man had said, "You're no longer my wife," and she was bound by that word. She could not accompany him. She remained in the temple. She didn't know what to do. She had no other place to go, and he would not listen to her, and she just remained there through the night. Overnight, she stayed there. And Neela Nakkar went back home. He was disturbed, but he consoled himself. He thought he had performed the pujas adequately to cleanse off and do away with whatever sin that was committed. So he kind of consoled and tried sleeping. It took some time for sleep to embrace him, and after some time, he really slept off. And during that sleep, somebody came and called him. Whom do you think would have called? Who else than Lord Shiva Perumal? Lord Shiva came in his dream, called him, and Neela Nakkar got up. He was elated to see Lord Shiva himself. "Oh, the Lord!" And then he wanted to kind of, make the Lord sit. He wanted to do all good things to the Lord. He wanted to perform puja. He wanted to wash his feet. He tried getting up and tried doing all that. But then when he looked up at the Lord, there was something wrong. And Neela Nakkar looked again, and there, to his grief, he found Lord Shiva Perumal had, lots of furuncles all over his body, blisters. So many blisters all over the body. And Neela Nakkar was grief struck. "Oh my Lord, all over your body, so many blisters. And the thought that came to him first was, if so many blisters, so many pustules, furuncles, it must be really painful. It must be really irritating. So he asked the Lord, Lord, is it painful? Is it difficult? The Lord said, of course. Of course it's a little painful, and it's little hot here and there. But you see, Neela Nakkar, one part of my body does not have any of these blisters. My left shoulder does not have any blisters. And that part is very cool. So in a way it is compensating. It is compensating for all that heat on one side. This part which is cool, it's compensating. My left shoulder does not have any blisters. So now Neela Nakkar looked up, and true, there were no blisters in that part of the body. And as Neela Nakkar was looking like that, Lord Shiva said, you know why no blisters there? That is the place where your wife blew this morning. That is the place where some of her salivary droplets came and touched. That is the place where she blew with her mouth. That place is cool. And Neela Nakkar did not know what to say. He was surprised, perplexed. We are also perplexed, isn't it? Equally. Now what had happened? That morning, now think back what happened. It's a kind of a flashback. That morning, when Neela Nakkar opened the door, this lady who was standing at the threshold of the temple was able to see inside. And there she saw the Shivalinga. And what did she see? She saw the Shivalinga, and as she saw from here, she was able to see there was a scorpion moving over the Shivalinga. She saw that creature moving over, and she was shocked. She was also pained. She thought Shivalinga is her child. She thought Shiva is her child. What would be a mother's reaction when she finds there is some kind of a creature moving on her child's body? Even if a spider moves along, what will she do? So this lady saw that, and she saw a poisonous creature moving on my child's body. She was pained. She wanted to do something. She has to save her child. So she ran. That is why she darted, ran there. And even today, in some of the villages, you find there is an age-old custom that is being followed. In the villages, medical help may not be available at hand. And what do people do generally? There are certain age-old traditional habits which are being followed, customs which are being followed. If a poisonous creature moves across the body of a child, the mother would spit, or the mother would blow and throw a few droplets of her saliva on the child. There is also a kind of a scientific basis behind. Though this scientific basis may not be 100% foolproof. Generally, it is believed that the saliva has certain chemical substances which are likely to neutralize the poisonous effect of such movement. It is true in the case of other animals, but in the case of human beings, it may not be 100% foolproof. But still, when there is no other medical help available, we try to do something, try to save the child. All of us would remember, many of us who belong to the earlier generations would definitely remember, and even children today might be doing it. If we get a cut in the finger, some kind of an injury, what do? Immediately we put our finger inside the mouth, isn't it? That is because we try to lick that place, we try to put the saliva over and seal the injury. Now, this is a kind of a habit that all of us have. We don't immediately put some kind of a medicine there, not some kind of a cream immediately. The moment we get an injury, even today in the 21st century, we tend to put our finger into the mouth and try to make saliva rubbed over that area. The same thing. In the villages, women tend to kind of put their saliva over or spit there or even blow there so that the poison will not take effect. It is not the intelligence that matters there. Please do not ask questions. How much of neutralizing effect will this substance have over a very toxic poison? No, it is not the question of intelligence. It is not the question of an experiment. But it is the question of love. Pure devotion is pure love. And that is what we call as Vatsalya. The Vatsalya Bhava. In devotion, there are different styles of devotion. Towards God, one may have a devotion where God is something like the master and the devotee is something like the servant, a kind of a servitude, the relationship on the basis of servitude. This is what is called a dasya relationship. And then there can be another relationship where the God is something like the father or the mother, and the devotee feels that he or she is a child. There is a very famous line by the poet Manikavachakar, Ammaye Appa. And many of us go to the God and say, Amma, Appa, Pitaji, like that. So that is one kind of relationship where we call it as Satputra Marg. Satputra, you're the putra or you're the putri of the Mata or the Pita. And then there is another kind of a relationship where the God is thought to be a kind of a friend to the devotee, which is something like a Sakha Marg. But then there is also another kind where the devotee may think the God is a child. Many of us know Krishna was considered to be the child to so many people. Krishna was put to sleep. A lullaby was sung to Krishna by many scholars of this land. So that kind of a relationship where you think the God is a small child, that kind of a relationship is what is called the Vatsalya Marg. There is Vatsalya on the part of the devotee, compassion on the part of the devotee towards the Godhead. And this lady thought Shiva was her child. She could not see to have some kind of a damage, some kind of a bad thing happening to her child. She could not think of any damage happening to her child. She wanted to control. So she immediately ran and tried looking for the remedy that she knew. There was nothing there. There was no technology available there. And these were times when there was not much of technology around. This incident is supposed to have happened sometime in the 7th century. So 7th century was a time when we did not have much of whatever technology we know today. But this small village temple, and this lady, who was a very simple lady, all that she knew was she has to save the child. And she tried out whatever she knew. She went and hugged the Shivalinga, tried protecting the Shivalinga from the poisonous effects of that creature which crawled across the Shivalinga. And that is why Shiva Peruman said, please remember what happened this morning, and wherever, your wife blew on me, that part of my body is without blisters. And then Neela Nakkar understood. So the next morning, early in the morning, he ran to the temple and sought apologies from the wife and brought her back home. Now, would we not call this lady great? The great devotion that she had, the great love that she had towards the Lord. And please remember, we do not know her name at all. We only know the name of her husband, Neela Nakkar. If only we want to call her, we do not know her name. All that we probably can tell today with whatever kind of knowledge we have, we can probably say Mrs. Neela Nakkar or Srimati Neela Nakkar. That is all we can say. We do not even know her name. But here was one lady who proved her greatness in a small little simple act. So greatness is not there in being boastful of the facilities that one has. Greatness is not in the number of letters that we can add to our names, the number of degrees that we can have, but greatness lies in that small little act of devotion, small little act of love. And that is why when you go near God, it is love that matters, it is devotion that matters, and not the educational qualification. There are many of them like this. There are so many of them. I am also reminded of another woman who would sacrifice for the sake of the society. This lady had a son. She and her husband went to the spiritual guru. They had a spiritual guru, and they took the son also to the spiritual guru. And as they were there, the guru asked for the son to be handed over to him. What would be the plight of a mother to think of handing over a small little child to the guru? The guru might be a bigger person, the guru might be a scholar. Nevertheless, an average mother would not want to part with her son, her only son, isn't it? Chachiga and his wife Pahini were the two. Pahini had to give away her son. The son was then called Changadeva, and the Acharya would ask for Changadeva, and history would tell you Changadeva later on became Hemachandra, the very famous Jain monk. Hemachandra was even called Kalikala Sarvajna, and Acharya would say, I want this boy, this son of yours, because I find that he could become a monk in future and he would be taking good things to the society. It is that The monk would be taking good things to the society, but then for the mother to lose her child there and not have any contacts with the son later on, what kind of a grief would that have been? How much sorrow would she have had? However, she agreed. Pahini agreed and gave away her dear son Changadeva. And that is how the world was able to get Acharya Hemachandra. The mother gave the child not because she was selfish to have the son for herself. She could have thought, my future, my son will have to be with me and my son will have to look me after. But then she thought of the common good. She thought of what the society required. And she was prepared to sacrifice her own whims and fancies, her own desires, her own wishes for the sake of the society. Similarly, we have one other woman. Her name was Sridevi. She was the queen of the famous king Vimala. Vimala was ruling the area within which was Mount Abu. The Mount Abu area which we are now talking of, the same Mount Abu was part of the kingdom which was being ruled by Vimala. Vimala and Sridevi were a very nice couple, but they did not have children. It so happened that a sage would come to their country and then would bless them. When the sage blessed, he wanted to know as to what exactly was the desire of the couple. And the couple said, we have no issues, we want to have a son or a child. The sage asked them, would you want a son or would you want to build a temple? What decision could be made? Vimala looked at Sridevi. It is natural for a woman to ask for a child. So he looked at the wife, and the wife, after a few moments of thinking, said, if we have a child now, we probably will be happy for 30 years from now, 40 years from now, that is all. But then if we build a temple, generations and generations of people would be happier. And so Sri Devi decided to build a temple in Mount Abu, and that is how we find today Mount Abu to be a place of pilgrimage. Now think of these women. Sri Devi on one side, Pahini on the other. They did not want to keep even the child for themselves. They were not selfish. They did not think of their future. They only thought of what is good for the larger community, for the larger society. Sacrificing or giving away something which the individual desires for the sake of a communal good is what is called compassion. And true devotion always leads to compassion. Friends, please think of these women. Here are some women whose names we have seldom heard, and here are also women whose names are not known to us at all. We do not know the name of the wife of Neela Nakkar, and names like Pahini and Sridevi we have not heard very often. They were not great women who were performing great tasks. They were not women who were moving mountains, but they were women who were simple, who were stuck to their work, who were doing things which any ordinary average women would do. But these women had contributed so much. And is this not an act of greatness? Greatness does not lie in doing something extraordinary, but then greatness lies in doing a very simple thing in an extraordinary way. And that is how we find the great women of India. So let us keep thinking about these women as we would meet later with more stories about more greater women.